leave a message after the tone.
Chuck, it's Alex. I was just asked to serve as treasurer for our new business PAC and help get everything off the ground. We've got full support internally, leadership is on board, so we're ready to start moving forward. I'm familiar with setting up standard business banking accounts, but a PAC account is completely new territory for me, and I want to make sure we get it right. I was hoping you could help me understand where to start. Please, give me a call.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the latest episode of Pick Up. We had a little bit of hiatus over the holidays, made it through Q1, and now we're back. And I actually was just talking to Micaela, one of our guests, before the call, and talking about how the importance of consistency in maintaining good listenership, which brings us to our topic for today. So we're going to be talking about business PACs, and Tim, who's our lovely producer here, always great at coming up with snappy titles for our episodes. We're going to be unpacking the business PAC, and we've got two very special guests with us today. We've got Micaela. Is it Isler? Did I do that last time? By the way, we recorded this once already, and it was the do-over. But sometimes I forget which things I've already said. Was it Isler?
It is, yes.
And you're the president and CEO of the National Association of Business Political Action Committees, also known as NABPAC. So it's a mouthful, but I think it's going to be really important today to kind of understand business PACs and what's happening in your world. And I think there's some things that are happening in your world that are universal, that are impacting some other industries, especially with some of the changes in some of the population changes, Gen Z, the silver tsunami. These are things that have come up in some of our earlier discussions as well. And then we have Chuck Kettenacker, who's our head of PAC banking here at Capital Bank, and he leads the PAC banking team. And he's going to kind of get into some of the nuts and bolts of, kind of how PACs work with banks and the opportunities, the challenges. Before we get into all that, I think I always love to do like a little bit of like background on our guests, because it's like, who are these people? What are they talking about? They seem like they have interesting stories. And so Micaela, I would love, tell us a little bit about your journey to NABPAC, how you got to the CEO, I'm talking about myself right now, the CEO role, and just kind of how you arrived at NABPAC and how you see kind of your mission there at NABPAC.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to be back. And just want to also give a shout out to Chuck and your entire team, fantastic NABPAC members, and just really excited to be able to be with you guys today. So I've actually been in sort of the political space for over 30 years. I got my start in Texas politics. I'm a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin. I'm a diehard Longhorn and thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in Austin, Texas, which is a great place to be. And started working in really political party fundraising, and really had an opportunity at a very young age to get a lot of experience. I probably had no business doing some of the things I was doing at 22 years old. But something just sort of instinctually, I knew that the experience was worth a gold mine. I was getting paid nothing, but it was work that I loved, and the connections and the experience was really tremendous, such that the finance chairman of where I was working suggested that I consider moving into the PAC space. There was an opening at the Texas Association of Business and Chambers of Commerce. Their PAC had been dormant for a couple of years, and said I needed to go over and talk to them about resurrecting their PAC. And I said, absolutely, happy to. And of course, walked out of his office and was like, I don't even really know what a PAC is. I don't know how to do this. And so it was really on the job training. Fortunately, I was very lucky. I did get the job. I was there for a couple of years. And the reason why I even mentioned that is one of our federal lobbyists at the time, there were really no resources on the ground in Austin. I didn't really have a network of folks that had run PACs, had resurrected or started a PAC, and I really didn't know which way to turn. And he suggested that I look into joining NABPAC, which is just really crazy that I'm now the president and CEO. and some other organizations in DC. And off I went to Washington to go to a couple of PAC conferences. And within a year, I was actually kind of plucked out of Austin and hired by HSBC North America to run their political affairs program, where I spent 10 years really building and managing overall political engagement at a very large global bank, where we ended up being one of the top 10 corporate business PACs in the country. And I really gained just a lot of insight and experience. I had a promotional opportunity to move into lobbying, and that moved me to Atlanta. I have lobbied in now probably, I don't know, maybe 15 or so states, both on the banking side, but then also ended up moving on to the Property and Casualty Insurance Association, opening their Atlanta office and lobbying on behalf of the property and casualty insurance industry. And was there for 10 years and loved my job and was really enjoying the issues and the states I was working in. And the longtime executive director at NABPAC announced he was retiring. And a few folks called and said, "Hey, would you ever be interested in this?" And initially, I was like, "No, I'm happy where I'm at," but always worth a conversation, right? It's always smart to just go have a conversation. And in that conversation, the leadership of the organization was really looking to take NABPAC to the next level. And I left that interview really feeling strongly that I had to get the job because I knew that I could take NABPAC to the next level. And what I tell people is that every day I come to this job having been in the shoes of most of my members. I've sat in their shoes. I've run a PAC. I've run an overall political engagement program. And so I really come to the job every day thinking, if I were in their shoes today, what would I need from my trade association? And so that's really, and I've been here 7 years, and it's been an incredible experience, and I can't wait to dive into all the great things that we're doing. That's kind of the high level of my 30+ year journey.
No, I love it. I love it. And I think it really
Nice.
helps give our listeners like a really good understanding of, like seems like you've worn every hat when it comes to dealing with business packs. And I am going to want to get into a little bit of just kind of a little bit of a 101 on business packs. But before we get there, um, because I think that's an amazing journey. I love, Chuck, you had kind of shared with me a little bit about how you became a PAC banker. And I think most kids don't wake up in the morning and they're like, "Mom and Dad,
Yeah.
I don't want to be an astronaut. I don't want to be, I don't want to work with, the whales, or, pick your aspirational career." You're like, "Hey, I want to be a PAC banker." So tell
Yeah.
me, Chuck, because I think I think it's a really interesting story. Tell me how you tell our listeners how you ended up in the very compelling niche of PAC banking.
Yeah. So I got a degree in business and finance and actually wanted to do something with my degree when I got out of college. So I went and worked for a bank, started out as like a personal banker, moved my way up to an assistant manager. And then I was managing branches in DC for a super regional bank. And I just had clients walk in or people walk in the door that wanted to open up accounts for campaigns and PACs. I didn't really know what a PAC was. I mean, I think it was kind of in the news at that time, but in 2006, I think it was, it's not something that was really out there, at least in the banking world. And so working in DC, these people would come in and they'd say, "I need to open up an account." And I'd be like, "Okay, so where are your articles of incorporation and your bylaws and everything else that a bank would ask for from a business?" And I soon realized that these are not businesses. And and I would call my back office, in another state. And they were like, "What's a PAC?" And I'm like, "Okay, this is going to be fun." So um, I did some research on my own. I was right next to the FEC downtown, and they offered some like half day classes for a little bit of money. So I did a few of those, one around business packs, one around campaigns, and that's kind of where I got the idea. And I taught the back office, "Hey, here's the paperwork we need to open up accounts." Um, you know, and that was it. And then I later, after Snowmageddon here in DC, and I decided I didn't want to travel from Reston to DC anymore, um, and cut down my travel hours every day. I joined a smaller community business bank, and I worked with CPAs and government contractors. And it was like, you go to these business luncheons and there'd be like 10 people at a table and 8 of them are bankers and 2 of them are government contractors. And it's like, and I don't know the lingo. I was like, this isn't working. So I kind of thought back to some of the stuff I did at the other bank, and I talked to the president and said, hey, how about we start looking at political banking, basically. I mean, see what we can do. It seemed like the industry was very underserved. And I thought that we could be there and help out. There was maybe 1-2 banks that were in it at the time. And they thought it was a great idea. And it really just took off from there. We went out and met with campaign finance firms just to get a better understanding. I wasn't trying to sell anything. I just wanted to learn more and just understand what their needs were. And then from there, it really took off. We developed a few products specific to PACs. Again, they're bank accounts, but there's just some tweaks that we've done on the service side to make it easier and just kind of put together a full package for our clients. And it blew up. And then we joined NABPAC and participate in their conferences, and they've been a great partner. So we've seen a lot of growth over the past 15 years doing this, almost 20 years. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, what I love about both your stories is that, a lot of it is that kind of on the job training, right? There doesn't sound like there was a well-trodden path to, working with PACs and these organizations. And I know that, Chuck, one of the funny things that you mentioned when you were saying is like, oh, where are your articles of incorporation, where are all these documents? And it's like, well, these are not businesses, but they serve businesses. And I think, Micaela, I love for you to sort of just at a high level, because we are focused on business PACs today, and maybe you could kind of talk about some of the distinction of business PACs versus, I think, a lot of the PACs that other people hear in the news, and help our listeners just kind of understand what makes them unique, and that can probably also kind of dovetail in some of the challenges that we're going to get into today.
Oh, sure. I love this. I also teach the PACs in Congress class at GW, and the reason why I mentioned that is there's a little bit of history that I think is important for folks to understand, is that, PACs came on the scene actually in the 1940s. They've been around, almost 100 years. But it wasn't until the 1970s, really after Watergate and the scandals surrounding that, where a landmark piece of legislation passed Congress, the Federal Election Campaign Act, and it really just sort of codified PACs into federal statute. It expanded sort of roles and responsibilities. There was some subsequent legislation to sort of where we end up today, where we have, as Chuck mentioned, the FEC, which is the Federal Election Commission, and they are the governing body of what we refer to as separate segregated funds. And really that is where business PACs, trade associations, and labor unions all sort of roll up in our campaign finance system and how we're regulated. So you will often hear us referred to as separate segregated funds, which really ties in nicely to what Chuck was talking about, because the funds that we raise and the funds that we give to candidates for federal office literally have to be held in a separate segregated fund. And so the PAC aspect of it, as Chuck said, it's really, it's not that much different than any regular account, but it does have to be held in separate funds. It can't be commingled with any treasury funds. Oftentimes we will hear in the media, XYZ Corporation gave millions and millions of dollars to ABC candidate. And the reality is that's just a really oversimplification of how the PACs are run. We are held to very, very strict legal and compliance guidelines that the Federal Election Commission oversees. Our PACs have to report every single month to the Federal Election Commission all the money that we've taken in through these individual voluntary contributions from our employees and or our members. The maximum amount we can receive from our employees or our members, $5,000 a year. The average contribution to our PACs is roughly $26 a pay period. In today's terms, with the technology we have today, there's a lot of online fundraising. You may have heard of Win Red or Act Blue. These are sort of the party platforms where they're raising literally millions of dollars from small dollar donations. I like to tell people that our PACs were the original small dollar donors. We were really created to allow employees and members of our trade associations an opportunity to engage in politics, um, even if they didn't have the means to contribute large amounts of money. And so this really allows those sort of small dollar, $5, $10 a paycheck contributions to sort of come together for a larger cause and for a very specific industry or business or association or labor union. And so, we're really, really restricted in how much we can raise. And again, it cannot be commingled with the corporation, trade association, or labor union's treasury funds, which is why they have to be in these separate segregated funds. And then on the flip side, that money that we raise is not really meant to sit. And this is another unique challenge, I think, on the banking side. It's not really meant to sit in a bank account, and it's really not meant to make you money. In fact, you really don't want it sitting in your account very long, because the whole point of it is to give to candidates for federal office. So that is a little bit of a unique, I would imagine, challenge on the back end for a bank, because we're really not here to save the money. It's really meant to spend it. And so you can take the money that you've raised from those individuals and then donate those to candidates for federal office, 5,000 maximum to a primary election and 5,000 to the general election.
So I think one of the things that Micaela, that you pointed out is that, really the business PACs definitely are here to designed to work on behalf of the industries they represent, the employees of the organizations who support these business PACs. And I think you sort of touched on it, and I think it was implied in sort of the the banking regulations, but transparency is a big part of this. And I think, Chuck, maybe you could kind of talk a little bit about, let's get under the covers a little bit, and how is it that all this money is transparent, and that it is very traceable, and that's something that maybe people don't always think about when they think about PACs.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, every dollar that comes in is reported, either monthly, quarterly, with the FEC. And every dollar that goes out is recorded. So it's all public information. So you can go on fec.gov, pull up the PAC that you want to investigate or look at, and everything is there for you to see, including their fees, um, who they're paying, who they're giving money to, who their vendors are. You can pretty much see everything. So a lot of useful information on there. I think it's very transparent. I don't believe that you'll find another industry as transparent as this.
Well, and Micaela, so I know that one of the things that we touched on at the top of the show is a big shift that's happening. And I think when I talk about a big shift, I mentioned the silver tsunami, which is the kind of the big retirement boom. And we've talked about this on some previous episodes. I think we talked about it on an episode. We talked about real estate and how the transfer of wealth. And I think PACs are feeling this, right? Because traditionally boomers have been reliable donors to PACs, and now the focus is shifting to Gen Z. And I think one of the concerns was that the PAC is kind of an old model, or maybe that a PAC isn't as transparent as people make it out to be. And so I know that you guys had done some really insightful research recently into Gen Z's perception of PACs and all this, and it would be great to kind of help dispel some of these myths, because I think it's dispelling these myths is it's helping to reshape the way that organizations think about PACs and utilizing their PACs. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we kind of have to take a few steps back, even because these are actually really hard dollars to raise, and that's part of the reason why they're called hard dollars. It is not easy to ask an employee to part with their hard-earned dollars for a political cause, especially in this highly charged, highly partisan, environment that we find ourselves in. And so the best PACs are out there really communicating and educating really year round. I saw a stat where corporations have really 5 generations of employees that work for them, if you think about from boomers on down. And so our PAC directors and PAC professionals have to be really, really good at communicating to a very diverse, broad audience. And it's not a one and done. It's not a clickbait. It's not a sort of hyperbolic, sort of get people charged up like you see in the media on social issues. We're not talking about any of that stuff. And we're actually not even supporting presidential candidates. Our PACs really sit in sort of the members of Congress in both the House and the Senate. And that's really where our money goes. I don't know that of any PAC um, that's part of like a separate segregated fund in our space that's actually even giving to presidential politics, which really brings the temperature down.
Mhm.
And I just mention that because yes, we are concerned about retirements. We're concerned about layoffs. We're concerned about the future of any number of industries. One thing that is very unique about NABPAC as a trade association is we represent really every single industry there is. Most trade associations represent a specific industry, and it's all the companies and organizations that are in the banking space or in real estate. So we have a broad, very diverse set of members who care about a number of issues, oftentimes probably our competitors in the market space, and probably very often find themselves on opposite ends of an issue. I mean, I think there's even a question is what does pro-business even mean anymore today? That's a topic for another
Sure.
day. But I mention all this because um, it isn't really new for our PACs to have to manage through either a crisis or challenges in the workplace, layoffs, retirements, whatever. The best PACs that are out there have been creating a full education, sort of from the moment you're hired and all the way through your employment with an organization and really making the case as to why the PAC is so critically important for that business, for that industry, for their jobs, for their future. Um, but having said that, we do find that, more of the boomer generation are probably making more money. They're able to probably max out at, a higher, either at 5,000 or give somewhere in that sort of 25 to $5,000 range. And as you see those folks leave a company, that certainly is painful. As someone who had to raise that money, it would be so hard to see those folks retire. But most of our companies are really planning in advance for that day and are already implementing sort of a younger, maybe, they have different levels of giving, and maybe you're on the rise in leadership within a company. You're not quite at the executive level, but probably on your way there or have hopes to be there. All sorts of ways to bring them into the fold and to get them into the mix, maybe at a lower price point. But the hope is that as they move up in the organization, that they would really see the benefit of, supporting the PAC and why the PAC is so important. But we also went out and did some research and partnered with a couple of different research firms on understanding sort of Gen Z and even coming up from there with Gen Alpha. And I know that millennials and Gen Zs have always gotten a little bit of a bad rap, and
You
in
don't
some
say. You don't say.
But our data really shows that if you are talking about the issues, if you're talking about, um, the why it really matters, why it makes sense, um, and you can really talk about, I think, that transparency, which is so critically important. Our PACs are the most transparent way of participating in our political process. And we're also a moderating force in politics. We aren't out there talking about social issues and divisive issues. We are out there talking about the issues that impact you as an employee directly of this organization. And when you start talking about the risks, the benefits, and that these are very transparent, accountable, limited, regulated forms of giving, you start to see that the millennial, Gen Z, they really appreciate that, and that really resonates with them. And as long as they have the information, they're actually really in line with where our PACs are. So there's a lot of hope there. And so for anyone out there that is raising money from the younger generations, you really have to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, is that education is so critically important, and it's not a one and done. You have to say it, as we all know as communicators, one time, two times, three times. I see it even in running a national trade association. We put a lot of stuff out there, and I find that I'm repeating myself over and over with my members because maybe they missed that email or maybe they weren't on that webinar. So you've got to find the right channels, the right timing. And as long as you're continuing to do that, we really view this as, if you're supporting the PAC, it's really a member benefit. It's almost like an HR benefit. And as someone who ran political programs for a very large global bank, I often heard from my employees that it was so great to work somewhere where we were providing just good government, civic education. A lot of what we do, you may only go in and ask for money once a year, but year round, you're talking about the elections, how to get registered to vote. Where's my polling location? What are the issues of importance? Who's my congressman? I may not know who my congressman is, and that's okay. We're giving you that information in a very nonpartisan way. That is the kind of information that the younger generation is really looking for and supportive of.
So I'm going to direct this question to both of you because I think you guys both, interface with your customers. Chuck, obviously you work with a lot of PACs. Micaela, I'm sure you're on the phone constantly dealing with members. The businesses or trade associations that have healthy kind of engagement and really lean into the utilization of their PACs and the education. Like, do you see any difference in the organizational health and either like employee retention or usage of sort of maybe taking advantage of the advocacy? Like, do you notice a benefit to these organizations or these businesses when they really invest the time and the energy into utilizing their PAC?
Yeah, I think so. We don't see it as much in the smaller community banking space. As you notice, we haven't been solicited this year from any PAC. However, um, I definitely have seen it in the past at larger institutions that I've worked for, where you saw that involvement. I actually learned a lot about it from kind of like what Micaela said, where there was like, here's your congressman, here's how you register to vote, here's all the, the different things that go along with it. So I think I also understood what was going on in my industry as well, and what bills were coming up and how it could affect my job. And I think that's where I really resonated with what was going on, is that, you know, there's some things coming up like in 2008 with the housing crisis and all that. And there's a lot of stuff being put forward that I was like, I should probably start giving to this because this will affect me. And they have my best interest if I want to stay on this career path. So, um, yeah, I definitely think it did.
Micaela, I'm sure that mirrors a lot of what you hear from your members, right? Or I'm sure you've seen, like, maybe you can give an example of, like, you don't need to name names, but like maybe a turnaround where like a PAC, an organization that maybe hadn't really leaned into their PAC and utilized it to their fullest extent. And when they made that shift, like what did they, any anecdotes around kind of what they saw in improvement in employee engagement and retention?
I think one that'll probably just really resonate with your audience is really the tech industry. I think that in the, sort of the tech bros and the guys that were starting all these companies didn't sort of in some ways, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but kind of thumb their nose at Washington. Like, we've got the technology, we've got these, the latest and greatest, we don't need, and then suddenly government starts poking around, you start looking at maybe some antitrust issues, then there may be taxes and all these issues that if you're, it's a joke in Washington, we say it all the time, but if you don't have a seat at the table in Washington, you're on the menu. And
I love
at,
that. Yeah.
and at least if you have, and it doesn't mean you have to have a $5 million PAC or even $1 million PAC, but if you have an overall political engagement program, you have, lobbyists or retained lobbyists in-house, um, you understand what issues you're for and against, and you are at the table at least being able to represent your side of the issues. You may not win every single issue. You may not kill every bad bill. You may not win every, bill that you're trying to get across the finish line. But if you have an opportunity to have a say in how your industry is regulated, it's just smart business sense to be at the table. And
Yeah.
I think the technology industry, if you look at the Microsofts and even the Facebooks, I think they probably came to the table a little late. But now you have some of the largest PACs, some of the largest DC offices, because they understood real quick what could happen if you're not engaged. And I think you're seeing a little bit as it relates to AI, to crypto and some of these new emerging technologies, which has kind of taken us into the sort of super PAC world, which is a whole other topic. But it's important to note that the amount of money that some of these new emerging technologies are spending in the super PAC space, trying to raise money and to again have a seat at the table, they understand that they've got to be engaged in the political process. And we just saw this week, Anthropic also started and registered a separate segregated fund, an employee funded PAC. And so, we are still very relevant, and it's a very important part of your overall political program to have these PACs in place so that you can be at the events, so you can be developing those relationships. I tell people lobbyists are teachers, we're educators. An elected official may come in as a rancher, maybe they come in as a banker, maybe they're a small business owner, maybe they're a teacher. They may know a lot about whatever their industry is, but they don't know about all the different interests that they are going to have to eventually vote on. And so, I tell people you want that congressman and their staff to think of you when an issue comes up, that they can pick up on the phone and say, there's this piece of legislation. I can't make heads or tails of it, but I'd like to learn more from you. And they're probably learning from the opposite side too. And usually, hopefully you can meet somewhere in the middle. But if you don't have anybody for them to pick up the phone and call, they're going to probably only listen to the one side that they are getting contact with. So you really, really, it's a wise business decision from a CEO of an organization to ensure that this is part of their overall business plan, is to have a seat in Washington.
Yeah, and what I love about what you're talking about is, you know, all these things, they're typically local issues. You're talking about your congressman, you're talking about your local employer. The impact is really felt locally, and that's where I think that's maybe what gets lost a lot in the PAC conversation. That I think what your organizations, your members really advocating for the things that are impacting people like at home, right? That, Washington, if you don't live here, can feel like a far off place. Certainly can be far from Silicon Valley. But I think what all your all your members are definitely like focused on, where their headquarters and their communities and the people that live in their communities. And that's about, kind of maintaining and helping those communities flourish. It seems like a lot of like, what you're focused on, the people that are living there.
Absolutely. Our members, and it spans every industry, the media's really portrayed business as sort of big bad corporations. And I'm not saying everybody's perfect. And I certainly know that, there are issues out there, but 99% of what our members are doing, not only for their customers, but their communities, their philanthropic, their employee benefits, it's just not talked about a lot. And, as we all know, sort of in this sort of free market, you get rid of these organizations, these companies. What happens to those communities? What happens to the jobs? What happens to the Girls and Boys Club that relies on all of these companies who come in and either volunteer hours, sponsor different events, support them financially? there's really a trickle down effect, and there's way more good, I think, coming out of what our members are doing in their communities than not. And I want to make sure that we shine a light on that and make sure that we provide them with the most, positive opportunity to be able to get their voices heard on Capitol Hill. And one way to do that is to make sure that their PACs are able to continue to survive and thrive.
And so, I think that that brings us to sort of the last bit of our discussion today, because Micaela, I know one of the things, as you've been now 7 years as CEO of NABPAC, helping to, I think, help help your PACs kind of shake up and really sort of modernize how they fundraise, how they engage with employees, and I know, or their members. I know one of the something that you've been pioneering and rolling out is this, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but the notion of the engagement wheel. I know that's something that you've really been uh, publicizing to your members. So maybe we could talk a little bit. I know on the podcast we like to kind of get into, like to have like little takeaways and like, how can what's one thing that that a business can do if they're thinking about, bolstering their pack or even starting one. And I think part of it starts with just understanding um what a tried and true kind of engagement model looks like. So maybe you can talk through that for some of our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we talk a lot about is PACs are really a tool in the toolkit. We hear this all the time in Washington. Chuck's probably rolling his eyes, but the reality is our PACs have never been indexed for inflation. So the same $5,000 that we could raise from an individual contributor and the $5,000 that we can give to a primary or general election has not changed in those 50 years. Although the cost of running a campaign has gone up 7 times the amount of what it was, 50 years ago. And so, of course, that means that the value of that $5,000 or $1,000 has gone down significantly. I think today would be worth $33,000. Um, and so there's been a recognition over the last, at least decade or so, that, the PAC is a tool. It is certainly a very necessary tool. You're able to, it just, there's a lot that comes with that. But that if you're not looking at your overall political engagement, what are those sort of good government activities that you're doing in-house? How are you communicating with members on the Hill? What does your grassroots look like? Are you bringing constituents to the Hill that are the most powerful? I mean, the one thing that differentiates us the most from these sort of online platforms, there's two things really. We have an obligation to our employees. We literally sit next to these folks in a headquarters, in a facility. We can't we have to be honest brokers about what's happening. We owe it to them. They're giving us their hard-earned dollars. And so I can't just go in a one and done and not continue that conversation and answer questions and sit down with folks. And we have to do it in an honest and open way. And it has to be ongoing. We have to tell them 3, 4, 5 times, right? Like we talked about before. Um, but we also have to make sure that that their voices are heard, and we have to be able to make sure that we carry their concerns to the members of Congress. And so it's really important to us that that long-term sort of trust is maintained, because that's the quickest way to lose your donors. So I think as long as you've got that open and honest communication and you've got the right messengers, we see in the best PACs, sometimes it's the CEO and the C-suite, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's, that emerging leader in Iowa who just a phenomenal leader, is, kind of moving up the leadership chain in the organization and really passionate about the government affairs program. Getting that sort of peer-to-peer buy-in and support, that's just another spoke in that wheel that we talk about, is getting more sort of what I call the evangelists of the organization, diversifying your PAC boards, getting more people, to understand, to sort of create that echo chamber, and getting, what's more valuable than me and giving my money and my volunteer? It's recruiting 5 more people to give their money and for them to volunteer. And so the more that you can do that within your organization, the more success you're going to have. And as I tell every member of Congress, the money may be actually pretty minuscule when you really look at it, But what we bring to the table is we represent millions, literally millions of employees in every single congressional district, in every single state, who are choosing to participate in the political process through their organization's PAC. And we bring that to the table. And that is really the value that we bring.
So Chuck, I'm just curious. I know because you've probably seen dozens, if not hundreds, of PACs come through. Your banking relationship, the your accounts, and I'm sure you're able to see, hey, you know, these guys seem like they're doing a really good job of like, wow, this account, there's a lot of money flowing. There's a lot of money coming in and a lot of money going out because, Micaela is like, as you pointed out, like we're not here to save it. We're here to spend it. Um, I Micaela just shared a bunch of examples of like ways that, it sounds like these organizations kind of activate their their members or the leadership. Like, what have you seen as like maybe one example of something that's been really effective in your time in working with PACs where you've seen, hey, like all of a sudden this was like a small PAC and now they've been able to really grow and mature. Like, obviously I want you to maintain the anonymity of your clients, but love to just get kind of like an anecdote from you.
I think the one thing that I've seen that's really taken a small pack and made it significantly larger, I think is Pack Match. I think that's a huge program and that's where basically, if you're contributing to the pack, the company will match that, maybe dollar for dollar or a lesser amount, and they'll give to the charity of your choice in a lot of cases, or they'll have a range of charities that you can choose from. And I think that's probably one of the larger programs that I've seen out there that help bring in new dollars and grow packs in the business world.
And I think that really dovetails with some of the trickle down effects that Micaela had spoke about, and the ways that the community engagement really can motivate employees. But so as we round out the kind of the closing questions for the two of you, I would love for just sort of like we talked about a number of things today. We talked about some of the generational changes that are happening in organizations, and Micaela, you touched on kind of an always on approach is really there's no magic bullet, but it's really about kind of maintaining consistency of engagement, similar to how running a podcast, you gotta you gotta keep putting out episodes for people to listen. And I think Chuck, as you shared some of what you've seen to be effective, but I'd love to hear from you. What's the one thing each of you want to leave listeners sort of thinking about, and whether they're like an employer that is thinking about starting a PAC, or they currently have a PAC. What's something that you would love to have them take away from this conversation?
You go ahead.
Well, I think I I have been on this mission to educate on the facts about PACs. And in fact, my podcast is actually called Facts About PACs. So
Plug it.
shameless little
Let's do
plug.
it. Yeah.
And part of the reason why I teach the PACs in Congress class at GW is that I really am on a mission to set the record straight on our employee funded PACs and why they are such an important part of our process. And especially now with the emergence of super PACs and sort of super PACs really aren't PACs. They're independent expenditure only committees. They can't give directly to candidates. They really cannot even coordinate with candidates. In my personal opinion, what we've seen is that it's a lot of sort of billionaire types who have money to sort of throw around and hedge their bets on a particular candidate where they feel like they can maybe play around a little bit in politics, if you will. No real long-term need for relationship development and education and all the things that our PACs do, and are not limited. Someone can write a check for $1 million tomorrow. They can write a check for $100 million tomorrow. I'm still suspect, again, topic for another show, but I'm still suspect on really how effective those super PAC dollars are when you really pull back the curtain and you get down to sort of brass tacks, those direct dollars that a campaign can use for TV, advertising, staffing, yard signs, all the things they need to run a campaign. is still critically important. And so my mission is just whatever you're hearing in the media and seeing on social media, we're probably nothing like what you think we are. And it's really important to sit down and understand really how our PACs operate and why they should be the way that we move forward, and that we should put our arms around these entities that are transparent, that are limited, that are regulated, that are accountable in our political system. It works. And they really should be around for the long time. This is a model of reform that has worked for 50 years, and we should really continue to make sure that these are the sustainable going forward.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree. And JJ, I was going to say, the one thing that I think people should take away is that whether they're starting a PAC or they have an existing PAC, is if they're not a member of NABPAC, they should be. You can learn so much there. I've been a member since 2011, 2012, and I wouldn't be where I was today without NABPAC and some of the other organizations out there that really promote us and give us opportunities to speak and sponsor different things, but also just to learn. Um, I don't have to know all the things but it's good to be in that environment and get the education so that I can participate in the conversations when networking. And if I see something that comes up on the banking end, I'll understand it and can, help clients with it. So.
It's great.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. We really value you as a member. And we work really hard to make sure that our members can feel that, sort of that partnership and the networking opportunities that we provide. So we are really proud to be able to partner with you guys.
So, Micaela, where can folks find you? Obviously, the Facts About PACs podcast. I love all the rhymes today. But give us, LinkedIn, website. Where can folks find you?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love for folks to follow us on LinkedIn. It's a long name. You do have to spell out National Association of Business Political Action Committees. There is another NABPAC in town, which is the Broadcasters PAC. So we're not that. And fun fact, we're not a PAC. We just represent the business PAC community. So LinkedIn at National Association of Business Political Action Committees. You can also find me at Micaela Isler. And like I said, on our podcast at Facts About PACs.
Love it. Chuck, where can folks find you if they want to learn more about the banking angle?
Sure. So LinkedIn at Chuck Kettenacker is one place, and we're actually putting out a lot of information on LinkedIn right now. So you can check that out. And then at capitalbankmd.com, you can go to the business tab and look at political banking and see our page there. It has all of our information, our contact information. And you can see that we're a member of NABPAC there and some other groups that we belong to. But definitely go check it out.
All right, Micaela, Chuck, thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next time. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, JJ.